The Apache
Why did
woman
you bring
added
us to
salt
this
to the plate,
place?
and the cowboy didn't know he had just said
Where we make our
yes.
stand.
The small town seemed quiet, almost too quiet, except for the occasional creak of a wooden sign swinging in the wind or the distant clatter of hooves on the dirt road. A lone cowboy rode slowly into town, his horse kicking up small clouds of dust with every step. His boots were worn, and his hat shaded eyes that had seen more open plains than the average townsman. He carried himself with quiet confidence, yet there was a softness in his gaze, a gentle curiosity that often went unnoticed by those who met him only in passing. He had been traveling for days, moving from one town to another, searching for work or perhaps something he couldn't quite name. Life on the frontier was tough, especially for a man who respected the rules of kindness and honesty above all else. And yet, he wasn't a stranger to adventure. Each town brought its own stories, its own people, and he had learned that sometimes the smallest encounters could leave the deepest marks on one's life. This particular evening, the cowboy's attention was drawn to a modest building on the edge of town. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the rich smell of cooking meat and freshly baked bread. It was a simple home, built from timber and stone, but it had an inviting warmth that seemed to reach out even to a weary traveler. The cowboy slowed his horse and looked at the door. Hesitation lingered for a moment. He had learned to respect other people's spaces, especially in towns like this, where outsiders were often met with suspicion. Yet something about the soft glow of light through the window made him take a step forward. Inside, a woman was tending to a wooden table, arranging dishes with a care that seemed almost ceremonial. She moved with quiet purpose, her hands skilled and sure. Her hair was long and dark, braided neatly down her back, and her eyes held a depth that told stories without words. She noticed the cowboy at the door but did not startle. Instead, she offered a gentle nod, a greeting that carried more warmth than any words could. "Evening, stranger," she said softly. Her voice had a musical quality, calm yet strong. It was the kind of voice that made one feel safe, as if no harm could come while it echoed in the room. The cowboy tipped his hat politely. "Evening, ma'am," he replied. "I'm looking for a place to rest and maybe a bite to eat." He wasn't sure if it was proper to ask, but something about her presence felt welcoming rather than cautious. She smiled slightly and gestured toward the table. "Sit. I've got supper ready. You're welcome to join." He dismounted, tying his horse to a post outside. The soft jingling of his saddle mixed with the gentle hum of the evening as he stepped into the warmth of the home. The room smelled of herbs and roasted meat, a comforting aroma that reminded him of simpler days, of homes he had visited in the past where the fire was always warm and laughter filled the air. The woman placed a plate before him, carefully arranging the food. She added a small pinch of salt to the dish, a simple gesture, yet one that carried a weight of tradition he did not yet understand. The cowboy, tired from his travels, merely nodded his thanks, unaware that the small act of sprinkling salt was more than a culinary touch. It was a meaningful sign, one that spoke of trust, invitation, and a subtle form of agreement according to her culture. As he ate, he noticed the deliberate care in everything she did, the way she moved around the room, the precision in how she handled the utensils, even the gentle placement of bread on the table. It was clear she took pride in her work, not for recognition or praise, but because she respected the act itself. He found himself admiring her quietly, fascinated by a woman so grounded in her ways, yet open enough to extend kindness to a stranger. They spoke in small, careful sentences at first, exchanging simple pleasantries about the town, the weather, and the day's events. But slowly, the conversation deepened. The woman spoke of her people, her family, and the importance of their traditions. The cowboy listened intently, genuinely curious, asking questions when appropriate and listening without judgment. He had met many people in his travels, but rarely had he encountered someone who could teach through both words and silent actions so effectively. The evening passed in a rhythm that felt almost magical. The sun had long disappeared behind the hills, and the first stars had begun to peek out in the night sky. The cowboy, though weary, felt a sense of calm that he hadn't experienced in months of traveling. There was no rush here, no pressure, only the gentle flow of conversation, the warmth of the fire, and the unspoken connection forming between them. At one point, he noticed the way her eyes softened when she looked at him, a quiet acknowledgement of his presence beyond mere politeness. He wasn't sure what to make of it, but he felt a subtle pull, a sense that he was not merely passing through this place by chance. Perhaps, he thought, some meetings were meant to be, small crossroads where lives intersected in ways unseen. The woman, too, observed him carefully. She had seen many travelers come and go, some respectful, some careless. There was something different about this man, something steady, honest, and kind. She could feel the weight of his life, the experiences he carried, yet there was a lightness in him too, a curiosity and openness that made her quietly hopeful. And so, when she added the salt to his plate, she did so with intention, a silent gesture rooted in a tradition that had guided her people for generations. The cowboy finished his meal, wiping his mouth with a cloth and thanking her once more. "That was some fine cooking," he said. "I haven't had a meal like this in a long time." She smiled, a small, knowing smile. "It's nothing fancy, just what I have to offer." He shook his head. "No, ma'am, it's more than enough. You've got a gift, I can tell." They shared a quiet moment, the kind that doesn't need words to fill the space. Outside, the night was alive with the sounds of crickets and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. Inside, the warmth of the fire and the shared space created a cocoon, a pause in the otherwise relentless pace of frontier life. As he prepared to leave for the night, the cowboy felt a subtle hesitation. Normally, he would have ridden out immediately, continuing his journey with little thought of the places he passed. But tonight was different. He wanted to linger, to perhaps understand more, to see what lay beyond the simple kindness of a meal and a warm hearth. The woman noticed his hesitation and nodded slightly. "The road is long and hard, I know," she said gently, "but there is always a place to rest for those who respect it." He smiled faintly. "I appreciate that more than I can say." As he stepped outside, tying his horse and adjusting his hat against the night wind, he felt a strange mixture of relief and anticipation. Something had shifted, though he didn't yet understand what. Perhaps it was the meeting itself, or the way she had made him feel welcome in a world that often felt cold and uninviting. Perhaps it was the quiet understanding that sometimes, even in the vast emptiness of the frontier, two lives could touch in ways that mattered. And somewhere in the quiet strength of her home, the woman watched him go, confident that their paths had crossed for a reason. The salt she had added to the plate, a small gesture unnoticed by the cowboy, held a significance that neither of them fully understood yet. But that would shape the days to come in ways neither could have predicted. For now, the night settled over the town, carrying with it the faint scent of firewood and cooked meat, the distant sound of hooves, and the quiet promise of connection, waiting to unfold. The cowboy rode to the edge of town, unaware that his simple nod of thanks had begun a story neither he nor the woman could have imagined. The next morning, the cowboy awoke to the gentle warmth of the sun streaming through the cracks of the wooden shutters. The town was slowly coming alive with the sounds of merchants opening their shops, horses trotting through the dirt streets, and the distant laughter of children playing in the open fields. He stretched and rubbed the sleep from his eyes, thinking back to the previous evening. The meal he had shared with the Apache woman lingered in his mind, not just for its flavor, but for the care and attention she had shown. There was something in the way she moved, in the quiet strength of her presence that had left a lasting impression. After a quick breakfast at the small inn where he had decided to stay, he found himself drawn once more toward the woman's home. The memory of the meal and the subtle kindness she had shown him created a pull he could not resist. He walked slowly, taking in the sights of the town with a new perspective. The buildings, which had seemed ordinary the day before, now held character. The people, who had seemed distant, now felt like part of a living story waiting to be understood. When he arrived, he found the woman outside tending to a small garden behind her house. The plants were vibrant and healthy, a reflection of her care and patience. She noticed him immediately and greeted him with a warm smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice calm and welcoming. "Good morning, ma'am," he replied, tipping his hat politely. "I thought I might walk by and see how your garden's doing." She chuckled softly, a sound like wind through the trees. "It's doing well, thanks." The plants respond to care, just like people do. He nodded thoughtfully. There was truth in her words. He had seen many people in his travels who gave little thought to others, who moved through life without understanding the small acts that made a difference. Here was someone who seemed to understand those acts naturally, as part of her being. As they spoke, the cowboy began to notice more about her ways, the rhythm of her work, the deliberate movements that carried meaning beyond what he could immediately grasp. She demonstrated how she tended to the plants, explaining why certain herbs were placed near others and how some plants protected the soil while others drew strength from it. It was a lesson in care and balance, one that extended beyond gardening and into life itself. The cowboy listened intently, asking questions here and there, genuinely curious. He had traveled far and wide, but rarely had he encountered someone who taught so much without seeming to instruct at all. The woman, in her quiet way, allowed him to observe and participate, showing patience even when he struggled with understanding. Later in the morning, she invited him inside for a simple meal of cornbread and roasted vegetables. As she served him, she added a small pinch of salt to his plate once more. This time, the cowboy noticed the gesture and wondered about its significance, though he did not yet understand it fully. He nodded politely, unsure of whether it was a customary habit or something more meaningful. "Do you always add salt this way?" he asked, genuinely curious. She smiled gently, her eyes twinkling with quiet amusement. "In my culture, it carries meaning. Salt is more than just seasoning. It represents trust, respect, and agreement. Small gestures like this speak louder than words." The cowboy considered her words carefully. In his own experiences, he had learned that actions often mattered more than promises. He could see the truth in what she was saying, even if he didn't yet grasp the full depth of her tradition. As the day passed, the woman shared stories of her people, their history, their values, and the importance of living in harmony with nature and one another. She spoke of struggles faced by her community, but also of their resilience and strength. The cowboy was captivated. He listened closely, realizing that each story carried lessons that applied to life beyond the borders of her home. He began to see the world through a lens different from his own, one that valued patience, observation, and understanding over haste and assumption. In return, he shared stories of his travels, of the open plains, of towns both bustling and deserted, and of the people he had met along the way. He spoke of hard work, of challenges faced in solitude, and of the quiet moments that had taught him the most. The woman listened with interest, asking thoughtful questions that encouraged reflection. In these exchanges, they found a shared respect, a recognition that though their worlds were different, their values often aligned. By late afternoon, they had moved outside again. The cowboy helped her with chores around the garden and the small yard, learning how to care for plants in ways that respected both the land and its natural rhythms. She guided him patiently, correcting his mistakes without criticism and offering encouragement when he succeeded. Each task became an opportunity for connection, a quiet dance of learning and teaching that deepened their understanding of one another. As the sun began its descent once more, casting long shadows across the town, the cowboy felt a growing sense of belonging. It was not the belonging of owning land or claiming a place in a town, but the belonging that came from understanding and being understood. He had arrived as a stranger, weary from travel, but he was leaving the day with a sense of connection that he had rarely experienced. The woman, too, felt the bond strengthening. She had been cautious at first. Travelers often came and went, leaving little more than footprints behind, but there was something different about him. He observed, he listened, and he respected the traditions that were so important to her. She had chosen to share her world with him, confident that he would not trample its values or disregard its lessons. As evening approached, they shared another simple meal together, this time with more conversation and laughter. The cowboy realized that he was learning not just about her culture, but about patience, humility, and the quiet power of kindness. He began to notice the small details he had overlooked before, the way she arranged the table, the careful placement of each dish, and the subtle ways she expressed respect for those around her. Before he left for the night, the woman spoke softly, almost as if sharing a secret. "Life is made of small gestures," she said. "Some carry great weight even if you do not recognize it at first. Trust is built one act at a time." The cowboy nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had witnessed it in the care she showed for her garden, in the way she treated him, and in the small acts that carried meaning beyond what the eye could see. He realized that life could be richer when one paid attention, when one embraced the lessons hidden in everyday moments. As he mounted his horse to leave, he felt a gentle tug in his heart, a quiet recognition that he was part of something larger than his own journey. He did not yet understand the full significance of the salt on his plate or the traditions she upheld, but he sensed that this encounter would change him in ways he could not yet predict. The woman watched him ride away, her expression calm yet thoughtful. She knew that he was beginning to understand, that he was opening his mind and heart to a perspective different from his own. The gestures, the stories, and the quiet lessons were taking root, slowly bridging the gap between two very different worlds. That night, as the cowboy lay beneath the stars, he thought of the day's events. He realized that he had learned something valuable, not just about her culture, but about life itself. Small gestures, patient listening, and genuine curiosity could transform encounters into meaningful connections. He felt gratitude for the woman, for her willingness to share her world, and for the lessons she had taught without even trying. Somewhere in the distance, the faint sounds of the town settling into night mixed with the whispering wind, carrying with it the promise of new understanding and the quiet hope of a deeper connection. The cowboy knew he would return the next day, eager to learn more, eager to continue the slow and steady journey of discovering not just her world, but the lessons it held for him. And so, as the stars sparkled overhead and the cool night air settled around him, the cowboy felt a sense of anticipation he had not known in a long time. He understood, in a way he could not yet fully explain, that his journey was no longer just about moving from place to place. It was about learning, understanding, and forming connections that went beyond words, a lesson that would shape the days to come. The next morning, the cowboy woke to the soft glow of sunlight filtering through the trees. The sounds of the town slowly coming to life reached him even from a distance, horses being harnessed, the clatter of carts on the dusty roads, and the occasional greeting exchanged between neighbors. But for the cowboy, none of these noises mattered as much as the thought of returning to the Apache woman's home. Her presence had left a deep impression on him, and a quiet curiosity tugged at his heart, urging him to see her again. He rode through the town, his horse moving steadily along the familiar paths, until he reached her home once more. The woman was already outside, gathering fresh water from a small nearby stream. Her movements were calm and purposeful, yet there was a lightness to her steps that spoke of familiarity with the land and its rhythms. She looked up and saw him approaching, and a small smile crossed her face. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying warmth. "Morning," he replied, tipping his hat. "Thought I'd see if you might need a hand today." She shook her head gently. "There is always work to do, but it is easier with company." Together, they spent the morning tending to chores around the house and garden. The cowboy carried buckets of water, helped repair a small fence, and even attempted to plant a few seeds under her careful guidance. She corrected his technique patiently, showing him the proper way to handle the soil and the plants, explaining the reasons behind each action. The cowboy listened closely, appreciating the wisdom in her words and the quiet strength in her demeanor. By midday, she suggested they take a break. She led him inside and prepared a simple meal as she had done before. When she set a plate before him, she once again added a small pinch of salt. This time, the gesture caught the cowboy's attention immediately. He paused, looking at the plate, then back at her. "Salt again?" he asked, curiosity mixed with a hint of confusion. "Is this part of your tradition or something else?" She looked at him, her expression calm and knowing. "It is both. In my people's way, adding salt to a plate can mean many things. It can show trust, respect, or agreement. It depends on the situation." The cowboy nodded slowly, trying to understand. He had grown to respect her deeply over the past few days, but he still did not fully grasp the weight of her actions. He picked up his fork, thanked her politely, and began to eat, unaware that the simple gesture carried far more meaning than he realized. As they ate, their conversation turned to more personal matters. The woman asked about his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned on the road. The cowboy shared stories of his experiences, of towns both bustling and deserted, of challenges faced under the sun and stars, and of the friendships he had formed along the way. In return, she shared more stories of her people, of the struggles and joys of life on the land, and of the traditions that guided their daily lives. It was during this conversation that the idea of partnership arose. She spoke of the importance of trust and mutual support, of standing together in times of hardship, and of sharing not just work but life itself. The cowboy listened carefully, nodding in agreement, though he did not fully connect her words with the salt on his plate. To him, it was a discussion about respect and understanding, not a formal commitment. After the meal, they moved outside again, and the cowboy helped her carry water and gather wood for the evening fire. The tasks were simple, yet they allowed for quiet moments of connection. She would pause occasionally to share a thought or explain a tradition, and he would listen, absorbing each lesson with genuine interest. The more time he spent with her, the more he realized how much he valued her perspective and the calm strength she exuded. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower in the sky, they settled near the small garden, taking a moment to rest. The woman spoke softly, her voice carrying a weight of meaning that the cowboy felt but did not fully understand. "Trust is built slowly," she said. "It is shown in actions, in small gestures that others may not notice, but which carry great weight. A word can be said lightly, but an action speaks for itself." The cowboy nodded, feeling the truth in her words. He had seen this in his own travels. People who acted with kindness, even in small ways, often left the deepest marks on one's life. He glanced at her, noticing the quiet confidence in her eyes, and felt a growing admiration for the way she lived, fully present and connected to everything around her. As evening approached, the woman invited him to stay for another simple meal. This time she placed a plate before him with even more care, adding a small pinch of salt as before. The cowboy noticed the gesture, but he still did not understand its full meaning. He smiled politely, thinking it was a sign of hospitality and friendship, and nodded in thanks. "Do you know what this means?" she asked gently, her eyes meeting his. I think it shows respect, maybe trust," he replied. "I'm not entirely sure, but I feel it." She nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. "You are beginning to understand." Sometimes understanding comes slowly. Sometimes it is felt before it is spoken. The cowboy finished his meal, feeling a strange mixture of contentment and curiosity. He had grown fond of her company, and he felt a sense of connection that he had rarely experienced in his travels. Yet he remained unaware that the salt he accepted so casually had already begun to signify something more profound, a quiet agreement, a bond forming beyond words. As night fell, they sat together by the fire outside her home, the flames casting flickering shadows on their faces. The cowboy thought about the events of the day, about the lessons she had shared, and about the way her presence had affected him. He realized that he was learning not just about her culture, but about patience, observation, and the subtle power of actions over words. The woman, too, reflected on the day. She knew that the cowboy had unknowingly accepted the salt gesture as a sign of agreement. She did not correct him, for she understood that true understanding often came with time. His willingness to listen, to observe, and to respect her traditions was proof enough that he would honor the bond, even if he did not yet fully comprehend it. They spoke little as the night deepened, each lost in their own thoughts. The fire crackled softly, the stars twinkled above, and the quiet of the night seemed to wrap around them like a gentle embrace. The cowboy felt a sense of peace he had not known in a long time. He had arrived in this place as a stranger, but he now felt the beginnings of a connection that was deeper than friendship, a bond that neither time nor distance could easily break. Eventually, he prepared to leave for the night, reluctantly mounting his horse. He tipped his hat to the woman, who nodded in acknowledgement, her eyes reflecting a quiet satisfaction. "Rest well," she said softly. "You too," he replied, feeling the warmth of her words even as he rode into the darkness. As he disappeared into the night, the woman remained by the fire, gazing at the stars. She knew that the seed had been planted, that the gesture of salt had created a connection that would grow over time. She smiled softly, confident that the cowboy would come to understand the depth of what had transpired, and that when he did, it would be with a heart ready to embrace both her and her way of life. The night settled over the town, carrying the quiet promise of understanding, trust, and connection. The cowboy rode through the darkened streets, unaware that he had already said yes without realizing it. The small gesture he had accepted, simple and almost imperceptible, had marked the beginning of a bond that would shape the days and years to come. And so, in the quiet of the night, under the watchful gaze of countless stars, two lives continued to intertwine, one through action, the other through understanding, both moving slowly toward a future neither could yet fully imagine. The next morning, the cowboy woke feeling a strange mixture of anticipation and unease. Though the sun shone brightly over the town and the air smelled of dust and pine, his thoughts were not on the world around him, but on the Apache woman and the lessons of the past few days. He had grown accustomed to her presence, to the quiet wisdom in her words and the deliberate care in her actions. Yet, a part of him felt uncertain, a small voice reminding him that he did not fully understand the gestures that had passed between them. As he made his way toward her home, the streets of the town seemed familiar yet slightly different. He had walked these paths before, but now, with a sense of purpose and curiosity, the buildings and people seemed more alive, more meaningful. The simple routines of the town, the blacksmith hammering at his forge, children laughing in the distance, merchants arranging their goods, felt like pieces of a larger story, one that he was only beginning to understand. When he arrived at her home, she was already outside, gathering herbs and vegetables from her garden. The sun highlighted the graceful movements of her hands as she worked, and the cowboy felt a pang of admiration. He dismounted, tying his horse to a post, and greeted her politely. "Good morning," he said, tipping his hat. "Good morning," she replied with a small, knowing smile. "You've been thinking, haven't you?" He hesitated, then nodded. "I have, about the salt, about everything. I think I might finally be starting to understand." She gestured for him to sit beside her. "Understanding comes with time and reflection," she said. "It cannot be rushed, but it seems you are ready to learn something important today." He watched her carefully, sensing that the moment held significance beyond the simple words she spoke. She began to explain the meaning of the salt gesture more fully, describing how, in her culture, certain actions carried weight beyond immediate comprehension. Adding salt to a plate was not merely a culinary choice. It was a symbolic act, an expression of trust, respect, and agreement. When done with intention, it could signify the acceptance of a bond, the willingness to move forward together, and the acknowledgement of shared understanding. The cowboy listened intently, absorbing each word. He realized that in the past days, he had unknowingly accepted this gesture, nodding politely and responding with gratitude, unaware of the deeper meaning. A mix of surprise and realization washed over him. He had thought his actions were simple manners, yet they had carried an unspoken agreement, a quiet yes that bridged two worlds. For a long moment he remained silent, reflecting on the significance. He thought of the meals they had shared, the conversations they had exchanged, and the time spent together tending the garden and performing simple tasks. Each moment now took on new meaning, each gesture a thread in a growing tapestry of connection. He understood that the salt had been more than seasoning. It had been a statement of trust, a bridge between their lives, and an invitation to something far greater than friendship. The woman watched him carefully, sensing his realization. "Do you understand now?" she asked softly. He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "I understand. I didn't realize it at first, but now I see what you meant. I said yes without knowing it, and I mean it." She smiled, her expression a mix of satisfaction and warmth. "Then it is good," she said. "The gesture is complete, but the understanding is yours now. True acceptance comes from the heart, not from words alone." The cowboy felt a wave of relief and clarity. The uncertainty that had lingered in his mind dissipated, replaced by a sense of connection and purpose. He realized that his journey had led him here not by chance, but through a series of small, meaningful choices, moments of respect, observation, and openness to learning. Each act, no matter how small, had contributed to the bond forming between them. As they spent the day together, the cowboy began to see the world through a lens shaped by her teachings. He noticed the way she interacted with the land, treating each plant and creature with care and respect. He observed how she approached tasks with patience and thoughtfulness, understanding that even the simplest actions carried significance. Her way of living, so different from his own experiences on the open plains, revealed a depth and harmony he had rarely encountered. He also began to reflect on his own life, on the habits and assumptions he had carried from town to town. He realized that he had often overlooked the small gestures that mattered, the quiet acts of kindness and understanding that could transform a moment or a relationship. Through her example, he saw the importance of paying attention, of valuing subtlety and intention, and of approaching life with both curiosity and humility. By late afternoon, they returned to the garden, where he assisted her in tending the plants and arranging the soil. Each movement was deliberate, guided by her careful instruction. He learned to observe, to anticipate the needs of the plants, and to understand the delicate balance of care and patience required to nurture life. She watched him work, offering guidance when necessary, and silently acknowledged the progress he had made, not just in skill, but in awareness and understanding. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, they prepared for the evening meal together. The cowboy felt a sense of quiet anticipation, not for the food itself, but for the shared moments that had become the heart of their connection. She served the meal with her usual care, and he noticed the salt added to his plate once more. This time, he understood fully. He smiled, nodding in acknowledgement, a silent affirmation of the bond they shared. They ate in companionable silence for a while, each savoring not only the food but the presence of the other. The cowboy felt a deep sense of gratitude for the lessons he had learned and for the trust that had been extended to him. He understood that this bond was built not on words or declarations, but on shared experiences, mutual respect, and the quiet power of meaningful gestures. After the meal, they sat together by the fire outside, watching the stars appear one by one in the night sky. The cowboy reflected on the journey that had brought him here, on the unexpected lessons, and on the subtle ways in which trust and understanding had been communicated. He realized that life on the frontier was not only about survival or travel, but also about connection, learning, and the ability to recognize significance in even the smallest actions. The woman spoke softly, her voice carrying the calm assurance that had come to comfort him over the past days. "Understanding is the foundation of trust," she said. "Once you see the meaning behind actions, you can move forward with clarity and purpose." He nodded, feeling the truth in her words. "I see it now," he said. "I understand why you did what you did, and I appreciate it more than I can say. I didn't know at first, but now I know. And I am grateful for your patience." She smiled, a warm and gentle expression that reflected both satisfaction and relief. Patience is a gift, as is understanding. You have both now, and that is what matters. As the night deepened, they shared stories of their pasts, their hopes, and the small dreams that had guided them through life. The cowboy spoke of his travels, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned. She listened with interest, offering insights and reflections that deepened his understanding of both himself and the world around him. In turn, she shared more of her culture, her traditions, and the wisdom passed down through generations. Each exchange strengthened their bond, building a foundation of mutual respect and trust that would carry them forward. Eventually, the cowboy prepared to rest, feeling a sense of peace he had not known for many months. He had arrived as a traveler, uncertain and weary, but he now felt connected, not just to the woman, but to the lessons and understanding she had shared. The gesture of salt, once a mystery, had become a symbol of trust, acceptance, and the beginnings of a shared journey. The woman watched him settle for the night, confident that the connection they had formed was genuine and meaningful. She knew that he had realized the depth of the gesture, and that his heart had embraced both the tradition and the bond it represented. The quiet strength of their understanding, built through small acts and shared moments, would guide them in the days to come. And so, under the gentle glow of the stars, two lives were joined in a way that transcended words, rooted in respect, understanding, and the quiet power of meaningful action. The cowboy had realized the significance of the gesture, and with that understanding came a newfound clarity, a recognition that trust and connection were the most valuable treasures of all. The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet town, casting long shadows across the dusty streets and illuminating the hills beyond. The cowboy woke with a sense of calm he had never experienced before. The events of the past days, the meals shared, the quiet lessons learned, the small gestures that carried so much meaning, had settled deeply in his heart. For the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of belonging, a connection not just to a person, but to a world richer and more meaningful than he had imagined. He prepared his horse and made his way toward the Apache woman's home. As he approached, he saw her tending the garden, her hands moving with the same care and confidence that had captivated him from the beginning. She looked up and smiled, a warm, welcoming expression that made him feel immediately at ease. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice carrying the calm strength he had come to admire. "Good morning," he replied, tipping his hat. "I thought I'd start the day here with you," she nodded. "There is always work to do, and company makes it better." They spent the morning together, finishing chores around the house and garden. The cowboy helped with gathering water, arranging firewood, and tending to the plants. Every movement, every task, seemed to carry a deeper purpose when done together. He noticed how seamlessly she worked with the land, how her attention to detail ensured that nothing was overlooked, and how each small action reflected respect for life and tradition. As they worked, they spoke of the days ahead, of plans and dreams, and of the life they hoped to share. The cowboy felt a quiet joy in these conversations, a sense that he was not merely a visitor in her world, but a participant in something lasting and meaningful. He realized that the bond they had formed was built on understanding, respect, and trust, the very principles she had taught him through her gestures and stories. By midday, she invited him to sit and share a simple meal. This time, when she added the pinch of salt to his plate, he smiled knowingly. The gesture was no longer a mystery. He understood its full significance. It was an unspoken affirmation, a recognition of the bond that had grown between them. He accepted it fully with gratitude and awareness and responded with a gesture of his own, a nod, a gentle smile, a silent acknowledgement of their shared understanding. "Do you understand now?" she asked softly, her eyes searching his. "I do," he said, his voice steady. "I understand and I am grateful. I may not have known at first, but now I see, and I accept it, everything it means, everything it represents." She smiled, a mixture of relief and joy in her expression. "Then it is good. Understanding is the beginning, and acceptance is the next step. Together, we can move forward with clarity and trust." The afternoon passed in quiet harmony. They continued their work, shared stories, and simply enjoyed each other's company. The cowboy felt a deepening sense of peace, a recognition that this connection was not fleeting, but something enduring. The lessons he had learned, patience, observation, respect for tradition, were now fully integrated into his understanding, shaping his perspective on life and relationships. As the sun began its descent, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, they sat together outside, watching the light shift over the hills and the town. The cowboy reflected on the journey that had brought him here, not only the physical travels, but the emotional and cultural journey that had transformed his understanding of trust, connection, and partnership. The woman spoke softly, her voice carrying the wisdom of experience and the calm assurance of tradition. "Life is made of choices," she said. "Some are spoken aloud, others are shown through actions. Trust and respect guide those choices, and understanding ensures they carry meaning." He listened, feeling the depth of her words. He realized that he had been part of this understanding all along, even before he knew it. The gesture of salt, once a mystery, had been a bridge between their lives, a quiet invitation to trust, respect, and connection. Now, with full awareness, he embraced it willingly, recognizing that their bond was built not on words alone, but on shared experiences, mutual understanding, and heartfelt acceptance. As the evening approached, they prepared a small fire and sat together, watching the stars emerge one by one. The night was calm, the air cool, and the quiet around them was filled with the promise of continuity and growth. The cowboy felt a profound gratitude, not only for her, but for the lessons he had learned, the patience he had cultivated, and the understanding that had blossomed between them. They spoke little at first, content to simply sit together and appreciate the moment. Then gradually, conversation flowed, about hopes, dreams, and the life they envisioned sharing. The cowboy realized that this connection was not about possession or control, but about mutual respect, understanding, and the willingness to support one another. It was a partnership in the truest sense, built on trust, actions, and heartfelt gestures. The woman, too, reflected on the journey that had brought them here. She had seen many travelers come and go, some respectful, some careless, but few had been willing to learn, to observe, and to embrace the lessons embedded in simple actions and traditions. She recognized that the cowboy's acceptance was genuine, that his heart had aligned with hers, and that their bond was strong enough to endure the challenges of life on the frontier. As the night deepened, they shared stories of their pasts, blending memories with reflections and dreams for the future. The cowboy spoke of the towns he had visited, the people he had met, and the lessons he had learned on the open plains. She shared more of her culture, her traditions, and the wisdom that had guided her people for generations. Each exchange strengthened their connection, weaving a tapestry of understanding, trust, and shared purpose. Eventually, the cowboy prepared to rest, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had not known before. He had arrived in this place as a traveler, uncertain and alone, but he now felt part of something enduring, a bond built on mutual respect, understanding, and heartfelt gestures. The salt on the plate, once a mystery, had become a symbol of this bond, a quiet affirmation of trust, acceptance, and connection. The woman watched him settle for the night, confident that their journey together was only beginning. She knew that he had embraced the gesture fully, that his heart had aligned with hers, and that the bond they had formed was genuine and lasting. The quiet strength of their understanding, built through shared experiences and meaningful actions, would guide them in the days and years to come. As the fire burned low and the stars shone brightly above, the cowboy felt a sense of completion and hope. He had learned to see the significance in small gestures, to value patience and observation, and to embrace understanding as the foundation of connection. He knew that his life had changed, not because of a single moment, but because of the accumulation of small, meaningful acts that had built trust, respect, and love. In that quiet night, surrounded by the soft glow of the fire and the endless expanse of the starry sky, the cowboy and the Apache woman sat side by side. Their hands brushed occasionally, their eyes met with understanding, and their hearts beat in quiet harmony. The bond between them, formed through gestures, patience, and shared experiences, was now fully realized, a connection that would guide them forward, wherever life's journey might take them. And so, under the gentle watch of the stars, two lives that had begun separately on different paths were joined in understanding, acceptance, and unity. The cowboy had embraced the meaning of the salt, the woman had shared her tradition with trust, and together they had created a bond that was strong, enduring, and filled with hope for the future. As the night settled over the town and the world grew quiet, both felt a deep, unspoken sense of gratitude for the journey, for the lessons, and for the bond they now shared. Life, they realized, was not only about traveling from place to place, but about the connections made along the way, the gestures, the understanding, and the acceptance that gave those connections meaning. And so, under the vast sky and the twinkling stars, their story continued, one of trust, respect, and quiet love, built on the simple yet profound acts that had brought them together and would carry them forward, side by side, into whatever the future held.